Hi guys, Rebecca the Explorer here. Today is 3/2/2017. The time is 2:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The time in New Zealand is 7:49 a.m. and it is March 3rd, 2017. In front of me you can see I have a map of Google Earth and I am going to do a little recap on the earthquakes that have hit. As you can see, in front of me, I have all of the quakes for the past few days, leading back to 1 a.m. on, I believe it was the 1st, February 28th at 1 a.m. And as you can see, this is where we were having some deeper quakes. We had a 1.3 at 99, a 1.9 at 87. We had a 1.9 at 109, a 1.3 at 56, a 1.9 at 109, I think I got that one already, a 1.8 at 83, a 2.3 at 60, and I usually don't count anything that's not over 50, a 2.4 at 145 kilometers in depth, a 1.8 at 67, a 1.9 at 50, a 1.6 at 66, a 2.5 at 126, a 2.1 at 148, a 1.6 at 111, you had a 2.5 at 137 kilometers in depth, had a 3.6 at 62 kilometers in depth, a 2.8 at 62 kilometers in depth, and we had quite a few threes. We had a 1.5 at 90 kilometers in depth. Okay, that is just for this area this time, so I'm going to go back and turn this off. Oops. Now we're going to go from the 28th at 3:09 p.m. in the afternoon to March 1st, 2017, which would have been yesterday, or today your time. We had a 2.1 at 56 kilometers deep, a 1.9 at 57, a 2.0 at 103, a 2.7 at 59 kilometers in depth. Then we had our first 3.8, which was 179 kilometers in depth. Then we had a 1.9 at 94 kilometers in depth. Then there was a 2.4 at 96 kilometers in depth. That was near Tasman Bay. Then we had a 2.3 at 88 kilometers in depth. It was the same area. Then we had a 3.8. That was followed by a 2.5 at 127 kilometers in depth. And then there was a 2.6 and a 2.5. Then there was a -1. Now I had a -0 today too. This falls on the flanks of volcano here. The two volcanoes. This one is Mount Rongaho and Tongariro. That was followed by a 2.3 at 120 kilometers in depth. Then we start 1 a.m. New Zealand time, and this is on, and this was upgraded to a 4.1. This was at 12:14 a.m. March 1st. So let's fix this amount here real quick since it was upgraded. See, I do have to go back and check these sometimes. Sometimes they'll do it without saying they upgraded it. So this was over here off the coast. This is near Kikora. That was followed by a 2.5 at 46 kilometers in depth. This was midway between Mount Taranaki volcano and Tarongaho, and I have a hard time pronouncing the other one, sorry. Then there was a 2.7. Some 1.8 and 1.9s. That was followed by a 1.7 at 72 kilometers in depth. 1.8, 1.9, very big. Then, if this thing will stop, I'll be happy. Then there was a 3.0 at 100 kilometers in depth, which fell back behind White Mountain Volcano. Then we had a 3.1, which occurred down here and Sudden. Then a 2.8 at 115 kilometers in depth. Then it was followed by a 3.4. Which was here by South Bay and Kekura. That was followed by a 2.1 at 129 kilometers in depth. And this here is, from my understanding, where they're doing deforestation, replanting trees, and using the wood because they have large paper mills. But if you look down here, you see it looks like they're doing some mining or something. And this is probably a farm there. In fact, I have something else over here as well. And then over on the other side, this is wood. You can see it on the racks. You can see it stacked. And then here, might be a park, I don't know. Anyway, the next large quake was a 3.1. And it also occurred down near of Kekura. The next quake was a 2.5 at 102 kilometers in depth. Which was near Mount Topo, or Volcano Topo. Now we're going to go into afternoon. After Dutch did the Dutch did the afternoon update. There was a 3.1 at 155 kilometers in depth. Let's take a look. Anyway, the next click was a 4.8. This was 20 kilometers southwest of Chevio. That was followed by 2.5, 2.3, 1.8, 2.5, 2.7, 2.4. It was followed by a 1.8 at 93 kilometers in depth. I don't know what these are. I'm assuming it's deforestation here. It looks an awful lot like Oklahoma. But I don't see any fracking evidence. Do see a truck here, or what appears to be a truck. So maybe that's mining. The next one was a 2.2 at 107 kilometers in depth. was near Stanley Brook. If you can tell, this is a long water area. The next quake was a 1.7 at 89, a 1.9 at 70, a 1.6 at 72, followed by a 3.7. Which is near the area of the 5.2. The next quake was a 3.0. The next quake was a 2.8 at 50 kilometers in depth and a 2.1 at 88 kilometers in depth. Which is also in this wooded area. We'll move on to the next quake. It was a 2.8 at 113 kilometers in depth. And it happens where the water's coming. And that, when we which is also off the Bay of Plenty. The next quake was a 1.6 at 90 kilometers in depth. Which is in the Kamanawa Forest Park. The next quake was a 1.7 at 91 kilometers in depth, and then we go to a 2.0 at 123 kilometers in depth. And I've been trying to figure out what this area is. Even though it's a forest area. The next quake was a 2.5 at 149 kilometers in depth. You can tell that's a road down there, but I couldn't land on it when I went to look at it the other day. It looks like they've been cutting the mountain away here. And this thing moves fast sometimes, so if I miss any, I will go back and show them to you. The next one is a 3.0. This one occurred right here between Christchurch and Cook Strait. So it was right here. The next one was a 2.9. Which occurred near Lake Grassmere. I'm going to find, next one was a 3.2, which also occurred here. Now this area's had a 3.1, a 3.8, a 3.2, a 2.9, 2.9, 2.3, 2.5. All of these are going to add up to a 4.8 eventually. The next quake here was a 4.8. This was not part of here, never mind. That goes out to Fiji. Well, we'll go out there anyway. It was 546 kilometers in depth. And it occurred where the D would be at, so right where the corner is. So this way and this way. So we had a 1.7 at 54 and a 1.1 at 83 kilometers in depth. Then we had a 4.7, which was upgraded to a 5.2. So we can see the terrain in this area. Very hilly. Then we had a 3.6. And 2.5 at 62 kilometers in depth. 2.7 and 2.7. Then we had a 2.2 at 124 kilometers in depth. That was followed by a 3.6 at 53 kilometers in depth. That was followed by the, wait a minute, which one is that? Yeah, that was followed by a 4.9. which is down here in the same area as the 5.2, and the other 4.8. That was followed by a 3.3, just followed by a 3.1 at 87 kilometers in depth. That was followed by a 2.9. Which is also in the same area as the 5.2 hit. Then a 2.1 at 101 kilometers in depth. And as you can tell, it's on the other side of White Mountain here, and close to Mare Island. That was a 2.4, 2.4, 2.0, and we come down to 3.4. If you can tell, it's in the same area. There's a 2.6, 2.3, 2.3, 1.8, 1.7. We had another 3.0. The same area right here. Then there was a 4.4 Fiji. This one here was at 576 kilometers deep. This one is on the bend, so it should transfer this way, and somewhat this way. Then we had a 2.3 at 204 kilometers in depth. Now this is different because this is on the other side of the volcano. It's near Aleutian, Caracramea, and Pattaya. And what I've noticed with these is they tend to transfer this way. So, this way. So this one here, I would think would probably come around Sudden area. That was a 2.6, 2.9. Occurred over here. 1.8, 1.3, 1.6, 1.8, 2.1. Then we had a 2.8 at 142 kilometers in depth. I put it in backwards, that's funny. Then we had a 2.6 at 147 kilometers in depth, which occurred near Tasman Bay. So we can look where we're at now. I don't know what this is, or this might be a building or a school, maybe a swimming pool. I know that looks like somebody's got a mine there. Next quake was a 2.6 at 130 kilometers in depth. This occurred near Otakamura Bay. And there was a 2.4, 1.9, a 2.2, and a 2.4. A 2.1 at 51 kilometers in depth. A 2.0 at 114 kilometers in depth, which is over here in the Cook Strait. A 1.3, a 1.8, a 1.9 at 65 kilometers in depth, a 2.1 at 93 kilometers in depth, which is here. Then we had a 30.2. And this was right here. In fact, I need to fix that. Then we had a 2.4, 1.9, a 2.7 at 98 kilometers in depth, this is near Sandy Bay and Tasman Bay. Then there was a 1.9, a 2.8, a 1.0, and a 1.5, a 1.4, a 2.3, a 2.2, a 1.5, 2.7, and that was followed by a 3.0 at 178 kilometers in depth. Then we had a 2.7, 1.8 at 2.3, and a 1.8 at 68 kilometers in depth. And then we move on to 12:13 a.m. my time this morning. I mean your time this morning for me. And there was a 2.9, a 2.8, a 1.4, followed by a 3.4, which is near Napier, a 3.5, which is near Napier, a 3.3, which is also near Napier, then there was a 2.0 at 114 kilometers in depth, And there was a 2.3, a 2.3 and a 2.4, 1.9, a 2.1, and then a 3.1 at 54 kilometers in depth, which is right here. Then a 2.7 at 71 kilometers in depth. And you can see they're out here working. And this looks like a house here. Maybe. That was followed by a 2.9. Which is over here near Gisborne. Followed by a 3.0. Which is near Tekapo. Followed by a 1.7, a 2.1, a 1.2, a 1.7, a 1.8, a 2.0, a 1.4, 1.3, and a 2.9. Down here near Sutton. This caught my attention. This was a negative 0.0. At 14 kilometers in depth. Which falls right behind Rebeca volcano. That was followed by a 2.2 at 93 kilometers in depth, which is also over here off what Dutch calls the catcher's mitt. It's followed by a 2.1 at 116 kilometers in depth. Which is over here in the Cook Strait, which is followed by a 4.5 at 30 kilometers in depth, over here near Napier in Hawke's Bay. And then this little swarm has started now too. That was followed by a 3.3. Just followed by a 2.2, a 2.3, a 1.8, and a 3.0. Back here at Hawke's Bay. Just followed by a 1.8, a 0.6, 0.7, a 2.1, a 2.0, a 1.6, 1.7, and a 2.1 at 90 kilometers in depth. Which is over here in Cook Strait. That was followed by a 1.9 at 64, a 1.4, a 2.5, a 1.7, a 1.9, a 2.3, a 2.4, a 2.3, a 2.7. And that's the end of the quakes till now that I have. As I look here, I still see this is your quiet area. This is your quiet area. Between here, here, and here, and all in here. And this warm area is still continuing somewhat. Anyway, you guys, go to Dutch Sense on Twitch. He'll give you the best idea as to what's going on down there. Again, much love. Stay safe. Remember, be prepared. Don't be scared and have a plan. This has been Rebecca the Explorer. God bless.